Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the first of two videos looking at moderation and mediation analysis of IBM SPSS statistics. In part one here, we're focusing on moderation analysis. Now, before we get into it, there is a prerequisite really to getting your head around this type of analysis, and that is that you should have some basic understanding of how linear regression works. If you don't know how that works, then you can research it before looking at this video, or alternatively, look up a video that we've made earlier. You can find it on our website, or you can search YouTube for it. It's simply called Introduction to Linear Regression. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about moderation analysis, what that is and how that fits within the realm of linear regression. So a moderating variable is one that interacts with a key independent variable, and it amplifies or dampens the relationship between the independent or dependent variables. It basically changes the line of best fit, the regression equation, if you like. A moderator variable is one that contextualizes an effect by changing the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. Moderating effects are also referred as interaction terms, so sometimes those are actually used interchangeably, interaction effects or moderating effects. So a key concept is that a moderator is not something that is caused by an independent variable. It is independent of the independent variable. And examples of this might be, if you're looking at, say, the relationship between the time of employment and your salary progression, is this relationship moderated by gender? That's a reasonable question to ask. Do you get a different rate of salary progression based on whether or not you're male or female? Does that change the line? Or how does the amount you study affect your essay score? Is this moderated, say, by the semester? Maybe people study a lot more in the first semester than they do in the second semester, or they spend a lot more time, and maybe that affects their essay score. Maybe you get a different equation, a different line of best fit for that. In the same sense, you might look at, say, how advertising spend affects sales. So every $1 you spend on advertising, how much does that affect the amount that you're selling? Does that relationship vary from region to region, say from territory to territory? It's a reasonable thing to think that region or territory might be a moderating variable. Now, it's a convention in moderation and mediation analysis to show the relationship between the moderator or the mediator and the predictor and the outcome variable, the dependent variable, in some sort of graphical form. With moderation analysis, it's a very simple graphical form. As you can see here, we have an independent predictor here. It predicts an outcome, and the moderator is totally independent of both factors, but it does affect or intervene, if you like, to moderate that outcome. So, you could have, again, we could have advertising spend, sales, and then region, which might moderate that or moderate the relationship between advertising spend and region. If we want to see this in a statistical equation form, then it probably makes sense for us to start thinking in terms of linear regression and how that's normally expressed. Normally, if you're doing a simple linear regression, you have two key elements to it. You have the dependent variable, your outcome, which in this case might be sales of a product. You have an independent variable, which might be the amount you spend on marketing or advertising of that. You actually also have a constant, which is added on to the end, which is sort of just a minimum value. But with moderation analysis, we have a third factor. We have a moderator variable, at least a third factor. And at this stage, that could just be multiple linear regression that we're doing at this stage. We simply got another independent variable that's been added in here, except that we know that's a moderator variable. And in this case, the moderator variable might be region or something like that. And then we have this fourth term, which is the interaction between advertising spend and the region. And it's basically, normally, if it's simply a scale field, you would simply literally multiply the two values together. So instead of having just y equals mx plus c, or y equals, in this case, b plus bx, we have our dependent, we have a constant, we have our independent, which is this variable here, and we have some sort of coefficient with it. We have our moderator and some sort of coefficient telling us the effect of that, plus the interaction on the end. So this is our interaction term. Now, if you wanted to do a really basic moderation analysis, of course, you could create this interaction term directly within SPSS statistics and then simply add it as an additional field along with your moderator variable into a basic linear regression. And if you saw that the interaction term was significant, then you're effectively saying that yes, this relationship is moderated by this additional effect, this additional variable. If you want to go a bit deeper though in moderation analysis, and certainly if you want to do mediation analysis, then you might need a bit of help. And it turns out that you can install an additional procedure, if you like, that will do moderation and mediation analysis. It's not available as standard functionality within the SPSS statistics, but it is available as a free downloadable package developed by Andrew F. Hayes. And Dr. Hayes created a package for SPSS and other statistical software such as SAS and R called Process. So the process procedure is one of the things which allow you to do moderation and mediation analysis in IBM SPSS. You can download it. It's got instructions on how to install the software, which can be found here at the www.processmacro.org. It'll take you to this site here. If you simply scroll down, you'll be able to download the package. It'll come down as a zip file. Obviously for SPSS, you're asking for the SPSS package. What you do is you download the process zip file, unzip the file in a location of your choice. Just put it somewhere that you can find it. And then when you start SPSS, if you right click on the SPSS icon and run as administrator, that's quite important. It will start in admin mode. And then within SPSS, if you go to extensions, utilities, install custom dialog down here, you can search for that folder where you've unzipped your SPSS process file and find the custom dialog file within that, and it will install it for you. And then once it's installed, if you go to use a new procedure, you simply navigate to analyze regression process, and that procedure will be available for you. Now there is some additional reading material available for you. Dr. Hayes has created a book that illustrates each step in analysis using lots of different examples, and as you can see here, it's based on SPSS, SAS and R code. There's lots of procedures there, so if you really want to get into it, there's additional reading available for you. I'm going to take you through a simple example of performing moderation analysis in SPSS statistics using the process macro, which I've downloaded and installed in my copy of SPSS. The example data file I'm using is employeedata.sav. This is a sample file, a well-known sample file that ships with SPSS. You'll find it in the samples folder where SPSS is installed. I've actually added an additional variable to it, which I'll talk about in a moment, but let's begin by looking at our core relationship here that we're trying to investigate, which is a relationship between people's starting salary, their beginning salary, and their current salary. And it's quite a strong relationship, as we can see in this scatter plot. There's a pretty high correlation value here. And what we're asking is whether or not this relationship is moderated by whether or not the employees started out as managers, whether or not they were hired as managers or not. In fact, we can see that when we do a simple means report, that people who are managers tend to earn on average in their current salary just under $64,000, and people who didn't start as managers earn on average $28,000. Now that doesn't mean that the relationship between beginning salary and current salary is different. Just because their average current salary values are different, it doesn't mean that the relationship itself is moderated by whether or not they began as managers. But we can start to get a hint around whether or not this is a moderating effect when we do some further exploration graphically and ask for a scatter plot. We do a scatter plot. We ask it to color it by this third factor, whether or not they started as managers. If they did start as managers, they're in the red points here. And we can see that on average, they tend to earn more money than people who didn't start as managers, which are in the blue group down here, which is quite a large cluster of them down here. And we can see that when we fit two separate line of least squares, effectively two separate regressions for these two groups, that the lines are slightly different. Now, whether or not they're so different from one another that we would say that started as a manager is a moderating effect depends on the results of our analysis, really. But at this stage, it looks like, all right, although people who are in the non-manager group, people earn less, it does look like the rate of increase between beginning salary and current salary is slightly steeper than the rate of increase for those who actually started as managers, which is slightly shallower at that point. Okay, so what does that look like statistically? We broke this down, this moderation analysis earlier, as a statistical equation. Well, in this occasion, we have our current salary as our dependent variable, beginning salary as our independent variable, started as a manager is a moderator variable, and then the interaction between beginning salary and started as a manager as our interaction term. So the full equation looks like current salary is equal to a constant value, which is usually a minimum value, plus a coefficient times beginning salary, plus a coefficient times whether or not they started as a manager. And because started as a manager is coded as 1, the coefficient will be related to how much more you get if you start as a manager, plus the interaction term, which really relates to that the difference in the slope for those who started as managers and those who didn't start as managers. Let's have a look at what that looks like when we perform our analysis in SPSS using the process procedure. So here in SPSS, we can point out our variables that we're using in our moderation analysis. We have, of course, our y-axis dependent variable, which is current salary. We have our x-axis independent variable, which is beginning salary, and we have a moderator variable here, coded simply with 2 values. 1 for yes, they started as a manager, and 0 for no, they didn't start as a manager. And we want to find out whether or not that moderates the relationship between beginning salary and current salary. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to be doing is going to analyze and then down to regression, because the process procedure is part of the regression family. And you should find if you installed it, it just appears here as process. In my case, I've got version 4.1 by Andrew F. Hayes. I click OK on that to pull up the dialog on that, and I start to specify, as we would with any dialog in SPSS, the roles that the various variables are going to play. So we begin by saying, what's our y variable? What's our dependent variable? Well, that's current salary. What's our x-axis variable? Well, that's beginning salary. We're not doing mediation analysis here, and we're not controlling for something. We could control for another variable here, like something like the length of time they've been hired, the length of time they've actually been in the employment. So we're not going to do that. What we are going to do is specify a moderator variable. We can have up to 2 moderator variables here. I'm just going to choose this one. The moderator variable could be a continuous field, so it could be some sort of value that's actually continuous in nature. It could be, in our case, a binary field, which is 0 and 1, or it could be a multi-category field, so it could be a nominal field with multiple categories in it. Let's say whether or not they started as a manager or clerical worker or custodial. We've actually got a multi-category field over here, job cat, which we could use. I'm just sticking with started as a manager and not, because it's easier to interpret the output, and it's a good starter for people who are learning moderation analysis. I can, however, specify that if it is a multi-categorical field, I can go here and just tell it it's multi-categorical and choose a coding system for this. We don't need to do that in this case because it's simply a binary field. We can ask it to save bootstrap estimates for us because it does some bootstrapping in the background, and it will create bootstrap coefficients for us, or inference for model coefficients. And we have some additional statistical output that we can click on. If I click on this, I can ask for various types of additional output. I actually don't need any of this additional output. I'm just going to stick with what we've currently got. The only thing I'll ask for is this test for x by m interactions. So relationship between the independent and moderator variable, and just give me a little test to see if that interaction term is statistically significant, and therefore whether or not this relationship between beginning salary and current salary is moderated by our moderator variable. To run the analysis, we click OK. It takes a little while for it to run it, and then we go to the output window to see the results. And when the procedure is complete, we get our output showing how the model's been specified here. It's just a text-based output. The y variable is salary, that's current salary. The independent variable, the x-axis variable, is beginning salary, and the moderator variable is labeled here as w, is the variable manager, which is did you begin as a manager, yes or no. We can see that there are 474 records, and the first type of output that we get when it says outcome variable here is salary, is basically it's basically linear regression output, so it's just standard linear regression output. We get some fit statistics. We get an R value here showing this quite a high correlation, which correlates to pretty high R square, 0.81, 81% of the variation in current salary can be accounted for using the various elements in the equation, which is basically beginning salary and manager and the interaction between the two plus a constant. We get mean squared error. We get an F test showing us a significant probability value indicating that the model itself is significant, if you like. It's better than random. And then we get down into the meat of it. So we have a coefficient here saying $3,000. So you get a minimum sort of $3,000 coefficient. That's your starting. It's not statistically significant, probably not terribly surprising, because it's often the weakest part of the equation, particularly when you get a really high R square value here. And we can see why it's not statistically significant, because it could be a minus number or a positive number, hence the lower confidence intervals and upper confidence intervals here are shown. Then we get beginning salary, and it's simply saying that you know, if for every dollar of your beginning salary, you will earn $1.76 in your current salary, and that really equates to people who are not managers, because if they are managers, then they get this additional bump on top, which is basically the effect of being a manager compared to being a non-manager is that you get what, 22,581 extra dollars. So it's quite a significant bump. And then we get this interaction term here, which is minus 0.4967. So it's saying that, you know, the effect of the interaction between manager and beginning salary is that you actually lose about 50 cents for every dollar of your starting salary. And these are all statistically significant here, apart from the constant, indicating that the fact that the interaction term is statistically significant here, less than 0.05, in fact less than 0.01, indicates that this variable manager does indeed moderate the relationship between people's starting salary and their current salary. We've got this additional test down here, which is a test that basically checks that whether or not there is the interaction between beginning salary and manager is statistically significant. You see it's identical here. The p-value here is identical to the p-value for the interaction term here. So it's not terribly interesting, apart from the fact that it shows us how much this interaction adds to our R square value, which is very small. It's, you know, it's only adding. It's adding about 0.5%, you know, it's adding a very, very small amount. It's not even 0.01, it's 0.0041, so it's only adding about 0.5%, but it is statistically significant. And then we have this interesting output here, which is the conditional effects on the focal predictor being the x-axis predictor being beginning salary at the values of the moderator. So when we're holding the moderator, when holding the values constant, what we're saying is that, look, if you're not a manager, you know, if you're not a manager, then the effect is 1.76. Basically, it's identical here, saying that your beginning salary is every dollar off your beginning salary gets you 1.76 extra dollars in your current salary. Whereas if you are a manager, you're getting $1.26. So it's a bit of a difference between the two. And that's interesting. The thing that's driving that, of course, is this interaction term itself, which is showing showing us that the difference in the slope, if you like, between 1.76 and 1.2, which is our effect here. What is the actual difference between that? Is it 50 cents? It's just under 50 cents. It's 0.4967. So that's what the interaction term is really referring to, is the difference between the two lines themselves, which are not quite parallel to one another, if you like. And that is how we can conduct a basic moderation analysis using the process procedure that we've downloaded and installed in SPSS. In the second part of this video, we turn our attention to mediation analysis, how that contrasts with moderation analysis, and how you can perform it, again, using the process macro.